didn't get into technology. I got into the people business. My passion in technology really is being that bridge between the business and technology, understanding where the business wants to go, understanding what the strategy is, and how can technology help support that.
Welcome to Tech Talent Today, where IT leaders share their tough challenges, creative solutions, and latest insights. You'll discover fresh ideas and inspiration here with your host, IT staffing veteran and president of Claremont Technologies, Jody Kulik-Mayer. And now, here's Jody.
Welcome to Tech Talent Today. I'm your host, Jody Kulik-Mayer. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Stefan Ott. Stefan is the CIO of a nonprofit in the mortgage industry. He's an entrepreneurial CIO, engineering and delivery leader who guides organizations through transformations and capacity build-out initiatives, leveraging technology to drive business outcomes for highly complex global organizations. Stefan is also a mentor for military vets and young adults in underserved communities. Welcome, Stefan. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, nice to talk to you again.
I understand that you are originally from Switzerland. What other countries have you worked in?
Really worked in and lived in. I have in the US and in Switzerland for any extended period of time, but worked with companies, right, very extensively. I have worked really across the globe with many different companies, but specifically, right, with Germany, France, and the UK. I've spent extensive amount of time in all these countries and have traveled across the globe, exploring a lot of other ones. Cultures in these different countries are definitely something that is interesting to kind of observe and learn from, but really in depth. I know the US now for almost 20 years and Switzerland for the other 30.
Wow. It must be interesting because the different cultures must change, like your management style and probably other things as well. I guess, what are some of the things that you learned?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of observe and learn from these different styles in terms of how people interact with each other. And I think there's also a really good book that I've read in the past from Netflix. I think the founder of Netflix talks about that quite extensively in terms of how you give feedback in the different cultures. And kind of in the more Germanic countries like Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, it's a much more kind of direct approach in terms of how you give feedback, and you can be much more blunt. At least that's also my personal experience. I feel here in the US, right, it's very important that you kind of follow the procedure of say something nice and something positive up front, and then you can kind of go into giving direct feedback. But it's really across the globe, right? I think you need to try to figure out how to work with these different teams and the cultures and how they respond to feedback. And I find the feedback is one of the main differentiators, right, in terms of how to work with different cultures and teams across the globe, because it's really so different. It's really different in the US compared to Asia, compared to Europe.
How is it in Asia? Because you mentioned, Europe and the US. So what's it like in Asia?
My personal experience there has been it's very much more kind of a private aspect, right, if you give feedback. My experience in kind of Germanic cultures, it's also you can give more public feedback and you can kind of really address certain things that you see right then and there in a meeting, for example. I have not found that to be effective in an Asian culture, and definitely also not the best thing I feel in the US.
It's interesting. I do work with people in a lot of cultures, but I also feel like in the US, somehow, even when you hear the positive part first, you're sort of getting yourself ready for the critical part second. You know it's coming.
Yeah, you know it's coming, right? And it's it's the setup, right?
Absolutely right. The shoe is dropping.
The shoe is dropping, right? And they probably not really want to say something positive. It's probably just feedback.
Right. So when you're hiring for your team, do you look for different things in different countries, or is it still like the same, quote, formula that you use?
In terms of building teams, right, and kind of getting the right people on board, right, I think that is, at least from my experience, fairly similar, right? I try to focus really very much on the particular person and the people and how they fit within an existing team and what is their culture fit, right? It's also for me, like when I look for either a new role or being part of a new team, I really pay a lot of attention to the culture in terms of how people are interacting with each other and how they are collaborating. That might also have to do with the fact, right, that I had a lot of experience working in teams and kind of team cultures that really didn't fit my personal style. So to me, it's very important to kind of determine what are these people that I would like to work with, right? Because I see them, typically interact with them all day or all week. And so it's really important to me, right, that we gel together, right? And if I think back, right, one thing from the book, right, Good to Great, I really like that quote with trying to get the right people on the bus and then really kind of determine where you're going to go and what you're going to do. That's very much what I try to do across the globe, right? If I build international teams, I think it's very important that you have a common understanding of that kind of team culture and that you like to work together.
Now, it's interesting you said that sometimes you're building a team and it doesn't fit your personal style. Could you tell a bit about your personal style and an example?
Yeah, but where I had this very obvious, right, was in an environment where I was working with a manager and I was part of a team, and that manager was a micromanager, right, and was really in everyone's business all the time. And that's just not something that works too well for me. I personally, right, try not to do that. I try to give people leeway, right? And if I feel they're able to do their job, I try to keep them back free, right? And run them with the charge ahead and trust them. Having that kind of micromanagement style, that was a relationship that didn't last that long.
Right. Well, I also think that sometimes when somebody's a micromanager, there's a lot of turnover on their team.
Right. And I mean, there's actually people, right, that like that, right, that like to have that kind of close guidance on a day-to-day basis. It's just not something I personally really thrive in.
That's a good point. And I guess I have a bias towards that as well because I don't thrive in it either. So you're right. Some people, that suits them. You've mentioned that you've been responsible for digital transformation at several firms. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, digital transformation is such a buzzword today, right? And it's kind of getting worn out, I think, at this point. But nevertheless, right, I think it's what every firm really today, I think, is trying to do is in my mind, or at least any company that has any interest to be around in the next 10 years, I believe, is on that journey of digital transformation, if they call it digital transformation or not, or if it's just transformation in general. But to me, it's about that agile mindset, right? Being a team, a company that is able to adopt, being a team and a company that is able to learn, right, and work and partner with each other. The other key piece in my mind for a digital transformation is the whole data aspect. And what do you do with data? How do you lead with data? How do you present data internally and externally and make it available for people to come up with their own conclusions based on the data? The other really important piece out of this is, I think, also automation and integration, right? We used to call it SDP, right? Straight through processing, where the idea was, right, to connect all the different processes, have data flow through the ecosystem of the applications, and have as little manual interaction as possible. So eliminating that interaction and the manual intervention, having to enter data over and over again, is also a key aspect. I have worked in and seen this many, many times, right? That is still today one of the big issues, that systems just don't talk to each other. There's a lot of legacy systems. There is a lot of siloed systems, even though, again, we have been talking about siloed systems and integrating them for the last 20 years, probably. And there's still a lot of companies out there that really suffer from that, and going in there and helping them connect these legacy systems. They don't necessarily even have to be legacy, right? Just have them connect and exchange information is a key piece. And it will also help them, right, with other aspects that kind of rely on each other. If you improve the data with having it processed automatically, then you also have better data to report on and in your data warehouse at the end.
Yeah, there's a lot to digital transformation. Do you think it's like an old concept, right, that just evolved, right? Because you said it was just systems talking to each other. Is it just a buzzword? Has it evolved? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a buzzword, right? We've seen these buzzwords come up all the time, right? Right now, the big buzzword, even though I would consider it to be part of digital transformation, is data, right? Everyone wants to become a data-driven company. But these concepts have been around, right? If we talk about APIs, right, and the connection of these legacy systems and having data flow, we tried to do this back in the day via RPC, right, remote procedure calls and so forth. Ideas repackaged, but it's a good thing, right? It gives you focus. It gives you something to kind of rally around. I actually like the term digital transformation. It's something that is not necessarily new, but I like to rally the people around it. Also, particularly if you're really thinking of it not just as a technology transformation, right? Which I think that's the key piece. It's really a transformation that has to happen on the business side, in the mindset of the business, with the help of technology, right? Partnering between technology and IT and kind of bringing this together.
Right. So what's the biggest challenge you're currently facing?
Biggest challenge currently is around data. And it's so interesting to me, right? It's really, how do we make this data that we have, and most companies have historical data, right? And how do we get that data ready for people to actually work with, right? And again, the buzzword there is, how do we get it into self-service, right? And how can we have people access the data and then run their own queries on it and their own report, build their own reports and go with that? It's not a new concept, right? I remember back when I first started working with DB2 in 1991, right? The 92. That was the big buzzword, right? That everyone and all the end users are now going to be able to run their own SQL queries. And we all know how that turned out, right? And how difficult it actually is to get a good result and an appropriate result and the performant query, right, back in the day. So making the data available in a form today that users can actually work with it and that they understand it, I think that is one of the biggest challenges. It's easier, obviously, in a smaller kind of company and smaller environment because you can build these logical data models, right, that kind of describe the data in a much more comprehensive way than what you could do in a really large company where you have either 20 different data warehouses, right, that store the entire knowledge of the company, so to speak. So making it available to end users in a understandable form. And how do we do that, right? We do that with data dictionaries, right? We do that with definitions around what these particular fields are, right? And which ones of the fields they actually should use for their queries. But still, I see, right, that we are getting more and more towards a self-service kind of setup. But there is still a lot of issues in terms of people pulling their own data and then just kind of looking at it in a vacuum or in a silo, right? And then someone else pulling other data might be at a different point in time. And then the discussion starts whose data is right. So there's still a lot of challenges, and I don't have the answers for that. What we're trying to do right now is build a new data warehouse with a new logical data model, a completely new data dictionary to help people really understand the data, not have to worry about the technical implementation in the background, so they can go and run their own reports. And we're using Power BI for that from a Microsoft perspective. And really the first kind of iterations of this are very promising, but you still need to understand something about the data to a certain extent. It's not just that anyone can go and run it. At least we're not there yet, in my opinion.
Right. It's interesting because, right, there's all these new reporting tools, but it does seem from what you're saying, the issue, if that's the right word, is more on the back end, how you set it up. It's not the tools pulling the data. It's the setup of the data.
Yes. Yeah. And the understanding of the data, right, in terms of how you run a particular query and if you understand all the facts in a particular data set. So it's an interesting problem. It's a good problem to have because it's clearly a much more advanced state than what it was over the past 20 years.
So you mentioned that you're an agile evangelist. Why are you an agile evangelist?
Where does that come from, right? It's, well, I guess it's a trendy term too, right? But
right.
No, it's actually something that is very near and dear to my heart. And if I look at kind of the Agile manifesto, right, that came out in 2001, I believe, and kind of think through what the different elements around the manifesto are, right, in terms of like individuals' interactions over processes and tools, right, or working software over comprehensive documentation as some of the key elements. The other ones around collaboration, right? And if I looked back at the work that I've been doing actually with someone on the business side back in 1993 around developing a balanced scorecard system, it was very agile, right? And it was actually one of the projects that I am still today really proud of. And why I'm saying that is we really developed the entire setup and the entire software in a very collaborative approach in a team. It was a very small team with about 6 or 7 people. It had basically a product owner, which was that business person that was driving all the business aspect. And we sat together and we developed the solution and the software together as an agile team or a Scrum team today. And once the whole Agile manifesto came out, right, and we started to kind of talk through this, what is Agile and Agile thinking, and then what is Agile software development, right, in the Scrum concept, all these light bulbs were going off. And it was like, oh my God, we've been doing this, right? We didn't call it Agile, but it was really kind of a moment where I was going, we almost have been a little bit ahead of time, right? And in terms of why am I an agile champion, and maybe I like that term almost better than evangelist, right? I like in terms of the approach, in terms of how people are working together as partners, right? How you integrate and how you really have the understanding within a team, right? No matter what is happening, right? Everyone is kind of pulling on the same strings. And if I'm responsible for testing, then tomorrow I might be doing something different, right? I might do either some coding or some scripting or some documentation. It doesn't really matter. We all work towards the same goal together, right? And we work towards building working software, right? That we can deploy and that we can then demo to our business sponsors and go in this iterative approach, either of 2 weeks or 4 weeks, 4 weeks of sprints. So I have experienced how great the results can be that are coming out of this, like a long time before Agile actually existed. And ever since we started to expand our mindset right away from the kind of waterfall approach towards Agile and Scrum software development, and afterwards also the scaled Agile approach, right, the SAFe approach, I've seen tremendous positive aspects of doing this. The main aspect that I love the most about it is that you have the teams work with the business as one, right? You are getting out of these discussions in terms of why didn't you deliver X in scope, right? It's something you constantly discuss with your product owner or product manager in terms of what are these items that are going into the particular releases, right? And you are constantly showing them what it is, right? So you get constant feedback. So this feedback loop and this constant back and forth between business and technology, that is the aspect that I think is the magic of it. And I've seen really great results with this. I've seen people that have been completely against changing into a new kind of way of how to develop software to become huge proponents of this new approach. Is it without any issues? No, it's not. Obviously not. There's always ways in terms of how you have to tweak it and how you have to change the way on how you interact and how you need to tailor the approach for your particular system and your particular situation.
I think it's interesting how you were doing Agile right before it was a named thing. So I could see how you'd be really excited when it came out because you're like, yeah, wait, we're doing this. Yeah.
It was really very special, right? And I mean, this was a project where this particular business sponsor or business person and I were kind of thrown together and said, look, here, this project is totally in red. Fix it. And so we basically went into a back room, right? And started to think about how could we do this, right? And how could we get out of red into green? And so we started to build a team around this and kind of iterate together.
Wonderful. How did you end up in IT?
I always wanted to become a baker.
So naturally, you're in IT.
Naturally, I'm in IT now, right?
Yeah.
So, but I never really liked getting up early in the morning, right? And my mother was always saying, you're never going to be a good baker if you don't like to get up at 3 a.m. in the morning and make fresh bread, right? So I had to look for something else, right? So, I really kind of had this passion for computers very early on, right? I remember ordering a C80 computer kit in mail order back in 1983, I think. 3 or 4, and kind of tinkering around with that, and then getting a Commodore C64 and C128, starting to do basic programming, right? And really enjoyed it, and really kind of was following the entire development of software development throughout my school career, right? And my career of becoming then also really a professional software developer. And I did really almost everything that you can do in IT, right? From being a help desk support person, where end users were calling in, installing networks, doing database administration. I've worked with many, many different programming languages, right? Basic, Pascal, COBOL, PL1. 1995, I believe, was the first time I was exposed to HTML, right? A very basic version. Was super fascinated with that. And then went into Java, JavaScript, and today I've kind of dabbled in Python, right? So definitely very interested in coding, but was always aware, right? I mean, there's clearly much better coders out there than me. I like it, and I like to understand it, and I like to understand the technology. But overall, right, to me, if you're asking me, how did you get into technology? I really would say I didn't get into technology. I got into the people business, right? Because my passion in technology really is kind of being that bridge between the business and technology, right? So understanding where the business wants to go, understanding what the strategy is, and how can technology help support that, and how can we as technologists be at some point, hopefully, a partner or a trusted partner, right, to that business organization. To me, it's how did you get into the people business? Because technology for me is all about how to make or get people to work together and how to collaborate and understand what's possible as a team.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting you to say that, especially because you said you're like tinkering with like the Commodore. And I mean, I do remember those computers.
That's a while ago. No,
yeah.
I mean, I still do, right? I mean, I love technology gadgets. I love to try new technologies, but it's concepts, right? And understanding how they work and how does streaming work, right? And all that kind of stuff. To me, technology is fascinating and it's everywhere today, right? And I find it interesting to see how kind of technology is more and more penetrating our lives all across the board. And there were these times, right, where we were saying, right, is IT still going to be relevant in 10 years? And here we are 15 years later. And yes, it's probably more relevant than ever.
It's really integrated into everyday life. So do you think a company should have a dedicated board committee that focuses on science, technology, and innovation?
So I've just completed training in that particular area, right, to understand better what it takes to be on a board and what is really the role of a board, right, and helping with the strategic development of the company. And do I think a focus on technology and cybersecurity is important? Yes, I do. And I think it is one of the trends that is out there in the board world that is focusing on that particular aspect, right? So I think as it is part of a strategy for a company to have technology and have technology help it drive its way forward. With that, I believe it's also important that you reflect that in the board structure and that you have a committee on the board that is focusing on that. And it obviously depends in terms of what industry it is, but I think that the majority of companies that at least I have worked for in the past can definitely benefit from having that particular setup in place.
Like in your career journey, did you have a mentor?
I never had an explicit mentor. It was more kind of that I have sought out people and ask for their guidance, right? And not so explicit, but more kind of like I have always made it a priority, right? To meet with people, to talk to them in terms of how did they get where they were and how could I how could I progress in personal development. And it's typically primarily around that, right? In terms of how can I either go forward and learn additional things, where do I have blind spots that I need to kind of focus on and work on, right? So one of that particular items is I have a very strong development and software engineering kind of background and project management and implementing large solutions. And I've never really focused as that much on infrastructure, right? And I remember very well one day on a call with one of these people that I sought out to kind of give me some guidance. The comment was very clear. Yes, Stefan, you definitely should focus on building out your understanding around infrastructure, around architecture, particularly as we are moving into the kind of cloud area. And so I really went then after going into infrastructure and going into architecture and solution architecture based on that recommendation, right? And really focused on that, did a lot of work in terms of understanding how to build infrastructure in a cloud environment, how to work on migrating applications. And I always try to be kind of more involved than maybe other managers might be with this, just because, first of all, I like the technology, right, of how to do this, how to build a cloud native application. But also because I really wanted to look at this as a learning experience. The same thing when I was moving into solution architecture. I never actually really thought that would be an area where I would end up in, but I tremendously enjoyed it. And this was kind of connecting all these different aspects from security, infrastructure, software development, obviously, right? And how to bring it all together. So never explicitly a mentor, but definitely always was kind of trying to learn from other people.
Right. Now, you're a mentor at NPower, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
What is NPower and why do you work with them? And why did you choose to be a mentor there?
It really was triggered by one of my last employers, right? Where we kind of were starting to look at other places where we could help people that are either trying to start their careers in IT, right? And people that were interested in kind of either doing also a career change, right? People that have had a background in actually physical security, right? And they were interested kind of in making a move into more kind of the cybersecurity space, right? And so very interesting kind of discussions in terms of how can you do this, right? What's out there in terms of available tools where you can go and learn about certain topics. And also, I mean, a lot of this mentoring at Empower is really about helping them kind of position themselves either on LinkedIn or on Twitter, although that's not my strength, but definitely on LinkedIn, and kind of helping them build up and showcase what they have done and what they've learned and how they can move forward with this. Very rewarding, actually, in my opinion, because it gives me really kind of a different background, right? So one of the aspects around the Empire is also a lot of former military people are kind of coming through there that are looking to kind of change their career, right? From a military career now into more kind of a technology related career. And very interesting to kind of understand that background also with my own background or experience in the military in Switzerland. Definitely an area that is also good to connect with these people.
Well, that sounds like a great thing. I was wondering if you had any parting thoughts today.
Always be learning and always be curious. To me, it's really the key, right? It's the key to life, and it's key to what I'm trying to teach my kids. I don't know if I'm super successful with it, right? But it's what I try to also showcase, right? Is I'm constantly trying to pick up new skills, right? Either technology skills or the training I did around understanding what does it take to have a really highly functioning board. I'm starting right now another kind of refresher course around financial analysis, right? In my original kind of training, right? I've done a lot of training around accounting and financial analysis. I'm trying to kind of get back into that. I find it a very fascinating kind of area. So be curious, try to learn something new each day. One of the things that I try to do religiously each week is reach out to people and talk to them what they're right now working on, right? And that always triggers something, or most of the times, something to kind of dive into that you have never heard of, right? That will be kind of my main tip, so to speak.
Right. No, I think it's a great one. Learning keeps things fresh, so you could be in a career for a lifetime. So, learning keeps it moving forward.
Right.
And I agree, because my job is always talking to interesting people like you, and I learned so much. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for making the time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Tech Talent Today, brought to you by Clearmont Technologies IT Staffing and Search. You can find out more at clearmonttech.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share. See you next time.